Hi everyone, and welcome to my first episode of JR Design Sessions featuring me, yours truly, Jonathan Rose. And today I'm going to take you through how you can make your photo go from this to that in just a few steps using the power of Camera Raw. Stick around. Now I suppose you're wondering, what is Camera Raw and what can it do for me? Well, it's probably best to describe it as what Camera Raw isn't. So if you're out and about and you're taking photos, whether it be with your DSLR or your phone or whichever it is that you have, chances are you're probably shooting in JPEG mode, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're shooting with those devices, basically what happens is that the specifications that the manufacturer outlined for their JPEG images, all those adjustments and changes get applied to your pictures as you take them. So contrast, sharpening, a little adjustments like vibrance and saturation, even your white balance is all anchored inside your photo at the time of exposure. It applies all of that after it. So a raw image doesn't have any of those things applied to it. It is, in the literal sense, a raw file without any adjustments. And so it's basically a digital negative, if you will refer back to the older photography days. That's basically what it is. So I have a bit of an artsy background in that when I was a kid I used to draw a lot and things like that. I would start with a pencil, sketches, do some inking, add some color, whether it be with painting or watercolor or whatever, just like any other artist would. So that's kind of how I view the whole raw process and why I like to take advantage of it, because it's essentially turning my camera into the pencil, the starting point, the sketch of the image that you're trying to create. And to me, that's the best starting point. So let's dive into this and I'll show you exactly what I mean. You can see I am here in Photoshop. I am using the latest version of Photoshop CC. This is Photoshop CC 2017, and to get to the Camera Raw editor that I was talking about, the easiest way really is to go to under the filter menu and choose Camera Raw filter. It is currently grayed out because I don't actually have a photo open at the moment. But it is there available in the newest version underneath the filter menu. If you've got an earlier version of Photoshop, don't worry, you still have access to this filter. All you have to do is, instead of going to File Open, you would go to File Open As, and then you would choose that, and under this menu for the format you would just choose Camera Raw, and it would bring up the same editor window that you're going to see in just a few seconds. So I don't need to do that. I'm just going to go to File Open and choose the first image of the two that I'm going to do. And you can see this, the window comes up here, and these are pretty much the main adjustment panel that you're going to spend the most time in, I would imagine. There are some other tools up here that we'll get into in later sessions, but for right now we're probably just going to stay right over here. And because this is a raw image, you can even change the white balance in post-production, and you can actually see the different options you have available here, which are just like the camera settings that are on your camera itself. And so as you change these, you can actually see the temperature slider here will move as according to what you've chosen. And as we can see, I'll choose daylight and it warms it up and moves it over to the yellower side, the warmer side of the photo. If I choose cloudy, it goes up even more. If I choose shade, it goes up even more. If I choose tungsten, it's going to bring it way back down to the cooler side of the photo, making a cooler effect on the photo itself. This is great for night skies or astrophotography, or even if you're shooting the Milky Way, it can give you this really sort of blue effect that really goes well with shots like that. So, but for right now, I'm just going to leave this as shot, and I'm going to warm it up manually based on how I viewed this space when I was there. This shot was actually taken at the University of Notre Dame. This was their Basilica of the Sacred Heart. This is a church that's on their campus. It's very beautiful inside there. And as you can see, I warmed it up just a little bit, just enough to kind of add some warmth into the overall photo. I'm going to leave the exposure right where it is for right now. I am going to bring up the contrast just a little bit. I'm going to pull back down on the highlights, and when I do that, watch what happens to these windows that are here in the background. You're going to see some of the detail start to come back in those details and some of the color. And I'm going to open up the shadows just slightly. You're probably not going to see a huge difference with these shadows because there's not really a lot of contrast in this photo. It's sort of a low light image. There's not really a lot of shadows in here, but there are a few. The whites and the blacks, there's a trick to editing these colors to make sure that you get them sort of right, and that is the Alt or Option key if you're on a Mac. But hold Alt, click, and you'll see the screen go black, and what it's showing you is the areas of white that are completely white in the photo. And so you don't want obviously all those areas to be blown out. So if I go all the way, you can see it blows everything out. But if you bring it back to where it's just starting to show, those are just the absolute white areas of your photo. So that looks pretty good right about there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the blacks. Hold Alt, click, and it's going to make the screen white so you can see the blacks. And let's see, I don't want to go too black because there's still some detail in that ceiling that we want to make out. So I'm going to leave those right about there. Clarity is a bit like sharpening. You don't want to go too far with it, but I will bring it up just a little bit. That looks pretty good right about there. I'm going to leave the vibrance where it's at. The saturation I might bring up to about 5. That looks pretty good. Now after seeing all these adjustments and what it has done to the overall photo, I probably will bring up the exposure just a little bit, just to sort of enhance the overall image, and that looks pretty good right there. So not too bad really. This is what we started with and we finished there. I mean, that's a pretty big difference coming from what we started with. So I'll just choose open image for that one, and I'll move on to the next photo. Now this photo is probably going to show you the biggest dramatic difference in using this Camera Raw editor. And like I said, going back to what I said in the video earlier, if you haven't shot any of your images in RAW and you want to edit them using the editor but you have JPEG images, that's okay. You can still do that, and like I said, just go to open as and choose that image, or you can just open it and it will put it in the RAW editor here, and you can still apply those same adjustments as you would a RAW image, even though this is a JPEG. You just won't have access to the options as your white balance. So all those, the tungsten, the shade, the daylight, those are all gone because they were locked in by the exposure on the camera. So just bear that in mind as you're working through things, but it is something to consider. So I'll go into the second and last image in this series. This was an image I took on the University of Notre Dame's campus. This was taken on the roof of the Hesburger Library. And again, I have my options here that I could choose if I wanted to, but I am just going to use my own judgment based on how I remember the scene when I was there. So this is a sunset photo, so I'm going to warm it up pretty good in the photo. I don't want it to be very cold, but that looks pretty good, probably right about there. I'm going to leave the exposure where it's at. I am going to bring up the contrast just slightly. And I'm going to bring down the highlights, and you're going to see probably a lot of the detail come back in the sky. which is very nice. We like that. And watch what happens when I open up these shadows. This is really going to make a huge difference on this photo itself. Wow. I never get tired of seeing that. That was a big difference. It really opened up the darkness that was in this foreground here. And so again, I'll hold Alt, click on the whites. I'm going to drag these down. Again, these are the absolute white parts of your photo, so you don't want that to be all white. We want to see some of that detail in there. So I'm going to bring it down to where there's just a little bit of white showing. That looks pretty good. Same thing with the blacks. Hold Alt, click, and we don't want to go too far, but we don't want to go too little either. And that looks pretty good right about there. Now, clarity is going to come in as a factor here. You do not want to go too far with clarity in this case, and you will start to see as you do this to certain images, you'll start to notice, especially around the horizon line, you'll start to see this sort of halo that materializes. Watch as I throw this way over to the right. Just keep an eye on that horizon line. See how sort of crunchy the overall photo got, and there's this sort of ghostly halo that appears. You'll see that a lot with over-processed images, or HDR photography is affected by that little too much over-processing. But we don't want to go that far, so we're going to bring it back down to where it looks a little more normal. And as a general rule, I tend to stay under 30 with this clarity slider. If I was doing a print of this to where it was going to be printed and mounted, I would probably go a little more aggressive with the sharpening. They say to over sharpen for printing, but in this case, for viewing on the web, digital, social media, that kind of thing, this is just fine. I'm going to leave the vibrance where it's at, but I am going to bring up the saturation just slightly. And that's really about it. I mean, without, you could add a vignette or, something else that you would want to that photo. But going from what we started with, which was here, there's the before, and here's the after. That is a huge difference. And that's just taking advantage of the Camera Raw basic settings that you have in here. There's really no retouching involved. All I did was bring out what the scene really looked like when I was there, and I was just trying to stay true to what I saw. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a first session that I was just decided to show you. So thank you all again for watching. Once again, this has been JR Design Sessions. I'm Jonathan Rose. We'll see you next time.